They're gone, all of them. And I'm still here. This is a log. My name is Marcus Kane, Marine Salvage Engineer, or what's left of him. Recording this for whoever finds it. If this ever surfaces. The date, I think, was July 15th. We were in the Pacific, somewhere deep. Too deep. Now, it's just me, and the silence, and the ocean, and the thing that swallowed them all. The world had been a perfect blue canvas, just moments before. A vast, unbroken expanse of sapphire ocean meeting an equally endless, cloudless sky. Below, at 12,000 feet, in a remote part of the Mariana Trench system, lay our quarry. A vault, they called it. A massive reinforced container, rumored to hold secrets that dated back decades, sunk with a vessel never officially acknowledged. My team, on board the Triton, our colossal salvage vessel, had spent weeks in this desolate stretch of the Pacific, carefully positioning, deploying, and preparing for the final phase of retrieval. As a marine salvage engineer, I thrived on these impossible challenges, coaxing impossible things from impossible depths. But this mission, this vault, had always felt different. A cold, persistent knot in my gut that no amount of logic or preparation could unravel. My personal domain, the Archibe, the rigid hull inflatable boat, was tied off the Triton's stern, a few hundred yards distant. I was out there conducting a routine, solitary inspection of the auxiliary communications relay. It was a brief, almost mundane task, a final check to ensure our surface-to-deep communications were flawless for the critical lift. The gentle slap of waves against the inflatable hull, the distant, reassuring hum of the Triton's generators, and the occasional cry of a lone seabird were the only sounds of peace. Then came the jolt. Not a sudden wave, not a collision with a rogue container. This was a profound tremor that resonated through the water itself. A sharp, violent shudder that felt like the entire ocean floor had just convulsed beneath me. My coffee mug, resting on the console, flew off, clattering into the inflatable floor. My hand instinctively grabbed for the ARB's console, steadying myself as the world seemed to tilt. The Triton in the distance, that massive, stable platform, suddenly seemed to heave, a grotesque, unnatural movement, like a dying whale. Her array of lights, usually ablaze even in the daytime, flickered erratically, then extinguished. A second later, the sound hit. It wasn't an explosion that originated from the surface or from the Triton's own systems. This was a deep, guttural roar that came from below, from the very depths we were probing. It was a sound that shook my chest, vibrated through the RHB's hull, a subaquatic detonation so powerful it felt like the ocean itself was tearing open. The surface of the water around where the Triton floated erupted, not in a splash, but in a violent, roiling boil, churning white, like a massive pot brought to an instant, furious boil. I saw the Triton lurch violently, lights already dead, her superstructure beginning to crumple inwards, as if gripped by an invisible, colossal hand that was twisting her to pulp. Then came the sickening, deafening sound of tearing metal, 1,000 banshees screaming as her hull began to peel apart, followed by the terrifying, prolonged rush of water as she was swallowed whole. My mind, trained in emergency protocols and the physics of deep-sea pressures, immediately recognized the impossible. This wasn't a boiler explosion. This wasn't a collision. This was something vast, something from the deep, the vault. They had hinted at its instability, at the extreme pressure differential inside. We weren't recovering it, we were just trying to contain it. What if it had burst? An internal implosion, perhaps, caused by a flaw in its ancient structure, finally giving way under the immense pressure of its contents or the retrieval process. Or worse, maybe it had been storing something truly volatile, a material reacting violently to the pressure changes or the sudden exposure after decades in the abyss. My mind raced with the possibilities, all of them terrifying. The shockwave from such an event, propagating through the water, could easily tear apart a surface vessel. It was like dropping a monstrous depth charge right under her keel. My small RHB, caught in the expanding shockwave, was thrown upward, launched like a toy, spun violently through the churning foam, then slammed back down with a jarring force that snapped my head back against the console. A searing pain shot through my left shoulder. I heard a sickening pop, followed by a grind of bone. My vision blurred, tears springing to my eyes from the raw impact. My left arm went instantly numb, dangling uselessly. I fought to clear my head, the pain a white-hot spear driven into my very being. The Triton was gone, swallowed. Where she had been, there was now only a swirling vortex of foam and scattered debris, life rafts ripped to shreds, twisted metal, splintered wood, all being sucked down into the churning abyss, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. My crew, my friends, vanished. The realization hit me like a physical blow, colder than any ocean. I was alone, utterly, hopelessly alone. A single, insignificant speck on an utterly indifferent ocean. My training kicked in. Assess the immediate environment, I muttered, my voice hoarse, a desperate whisper into the recorder, trying to ground myself in procedure. Check for structural integrity, potential hazards. Then assess personal injuries. Prioritize immediate threats. The Raichib was battered. The outboard engine, usually a trusty Yamaha, was submerged, torn from its mount, a tangled mess of wires and metal. The fuel tank, thankfully, appeared intact, but the lines were severed. No propulsion. The inflatable pontoons, tough as they were, had several punctures, hissing faintly. She was sinking, slowly but surely taking on water. My left shoulder was screaming, a dull, relentless ache that sent spikes of pain with every tiny movement. Definitely dislocated, possibly fractured. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my right eye, but no obvious bleeding from the scalp. My right arm, thankfully, was still functional, albeit stiff and bruised. I had to act. Fast. The first rule of maritime survival: get out of the water, or stay out of it if you can help it. I forced myself to articulate, each word a monumental effort against the pain and mounting dread. Even in tropical waters, prolonged immersion leads to hypothermia. The ocean leaches heat from your body 25 times faster than air. You don't have to be in polar conditions for it to kill you. And then there are the currents and the residents. My eyes involuntarily scanned the churning water, then the distant, still roiling area where the Triton had been. Sharks. The thought alone was enough to send a fresh jolt of adrenaline through me. My emergency kit. It was tethered to the Arib's interior, a small waterproof duffel bag that had miraculously stayed clipped. With my good right hand I fumbled for it, gritting my teeth against the waves of nausea from my shoulder. Inside, a basic first aid kit, a few emergency rations, a hand-crank flashlight, and crucially, a small compact desalinator, the kind that works on reverse osmosis, producing potable water from seawater. Not ideal for sustained use, barely a trickle, but a lifeline. And of course, this audio recorder, my last, desperate confessional. First, the RHIB. The pontoons were losing air, slowly deflating like a dying beast. I found a patch kit, a small tube of sealant, and a few rubber patches within the emergency bag. With one hand, battling the bobbing boat and the agony in my shoulder, I started working. It was agonizingly slow. The cold water, despite the high air temperature, sloshed over the floor, soaking my trousers and jacket, immediately chilling me to the bone despite the warm overall climate. My fingers, though not as numb as if I were in polar waters, were already stiffening and clumsy from the cold water and the shock. It took what felt like an eternity, wrestling with the rubber and the sealant, but I managed to patch the worst of the leaks. The hiss of escaping air slowed, then mercifully stopped. The RGB still rode low, taking on some water, but at least it wasn't sinking rapidly. A small, precious victory in an ocean of overwhelming despair. Next, my shoulder. I'd seen enough dislocations in my career to know what it looked like. I couldn't just leave it. The pain was too debilitating, and I desperately needed my arm. Reduce what you can when you can, or immobilize it, I whispered to the recorder, focusing on the mechanics, forcing my mind to be clinical, detached. Improvise a splint if reduction isn't possible. Protect the injured limb to prevent further damage, manage pain, and preserve function. I knew the technique for reducing a shoulder dislocation, the specific movements, but doing it on yourself, in a rocking boat, in the middle of a vast ocean, with one hand and a body screaming in agony, it was insanity. But what choice did I have? I gritted my teeth, found a solid point on the Arib's frame with my foot for leverage, took a deep, shuddering breath, and prepared to use my good arm to pull and twist, trying to leverage my dislocated shoulder back into the socket. The pain that shot through me was blinding. A primal scream caught in my throat, a black wave washing over my consciousness. I blacked out for a second, my head hitting the inflatable side with a soft thud. When I came to, gasping, sweat mixing with the cold seawater on my face, the shoulder was still out. Damn it. I tried again, focusing on the specific motion, the pop I needed to hear, the feel of the bone sliding back into place. Another blinding flash of agony, another near blackout. Nothing. The muscle spasm was too severe. Okay, plan B. Immobilization. I managed to find a spare rope from the Archib's small kit, a thin nylon line, and carefully fashioned a makeshift sling. It was clumsy work with one hand, but I managed to tie my left arm tight against my body, across my chest, reducing movement as much as possible. It wouldn't fix the dislocation, but it would stabilize it, control the worst of the pain, and prevent further injury. The throbbing eased fractionally. Every small comfort was a lifeline. The sun was already beating down, a relentless, unforgiving eye in the sky. The initial chilling effect of the cold seawater was now giving way to intense heat, a rapid, brutal shift. Dehydration. Sunburn and dehydration are as deadly as hypothermia in warmer waters, I reminded myself, forcing the words out, my throat already dry. Seek shade, even if it's just your own shadow. Conserve water. Ration everything. Sweat is your enemy. It depletes your body's water reserves faster than you can imagine. I pulled a discarded, mostly intact tarp from the Arib's floor, probably for covering equipment, and struggled to rig it over a small section of the boat, existing cleats and rope. It was flimsy, constantly threatening to rip in the gentle swells, but it was something. A pitiful patch of shade against the unforgiving glare. The silence of the ocean was beginning to settle in. Not the comfortable silence of a calm sea, but a vast, suffocating emptiness. No birds now, no distant hum of engines, just the monotonous slap, slap, slap of water against the pontoons, the occasional groan of stressed fabric, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. And the silence screamed. It screamed the absence of the Triton, of my crew, of anyone. My mind, usually sharp and analytical, felt frayed at the edges, a thin thread on the verge of snapping. I was alone in a blue desert, surrounded by water I couldn't drink, under a sky that offered no comfort, no hope. And beneath me, the vault. The thought sent a fresh shiver down my spine, unrelated to the heat or the pain. What was in it? Why had it imploded? Was something still down there, something released by the rupture, something now rising to the surface? My scientific curiosity, normally a driving force, a beacon in my life, was now a source of deep, unsettling dread. This wasn't just a shipwreck. It was something far more profound, a catastrophe with unknown origins and unseen consequences. And I, Marcus Kane, was adrift in its immediate aftermath. The horror was only just beginning. and I had a sickening feeling that the Pacific, vast and beautiful as it was, held more terrors than just the natural ones. Audio log entry 002, Marcus Kane. Day 2, I think, or maybe 3. The sun's been up, then down, then up again. It's hard to tell. My shoulders a constant fire, and the thirst, God, the thirst. This blue desert stretches forever, and the silence. It's starting to scream louder than any explosion. The initial adrenaline surge had faded, leaving me with a crushing fatigue and the stark, brutal reality of my situation. I was a tiny speck on an ocean vast beyond comprehension, adrift in an area where even the most intrepid commercial vessels rarely ventured. Our mission was secret, our location off-grid. No one knew where we were. No one knew we were gone. The thought gnawed at me, colder than the deep. My immediate focus shifted entirely to the most fundamental needs: water, shelter, and staying sane. The sun, a brutal, relentless eye, was already climbing high. The air temperature felt well over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but the glare off the water was blinding, even through my sunglasses. Heat stroke and severe sunburn are immediate threats in tropical survival, I rasped into the recorder, my voice already cracking. Seek or create shade at all costs. Cover exposed skin. Ration what little water you have with extreme prejudice. Every drop counts. Dehydration is a swift killer. My hastily rigged tarp, pathetic as it was, became my sanctuary, offering a meager patch of shade that only barely covered my head and torso. I pulled my jacket tighter, covering my arms and neck, sacrificing comfort for protection against the relentless ultraviolet assault. The salt spray, though cooling, was also corrosive, clinging to my skin and making the raw ache of my shoulder even worse. The desalinator, my last, best hope for fresh water. It was a small, hand-pumped reverse osmosis unit designed for emergency use, not sustained survival. It took immense effort with my good right arm. Pump, pump, pump. Each stroke was a battle against my throbbing shoulder and my rapidly fatiguing muscles. The sound it made was a maddening, sucking wheeze, followed by a tiny, almost insulting trickle of fresh water into the collection bag. It produced maybe a cup an hour at best, if I pumped constantly. Each drop was a victory, held on my tongue like liquid gold. But it was agonizingly slow. I knew I was losing more water through sweat and respiration than I was gaining. The body needs roughly a half gallon of water per day just to function in moderate conditions, more in this heat. I was barely getting a quarter of that. My thirst became a living, breathing entity, a clawing agony in my throat. My lips cracked, my tongue felt like sandpaper. I forced myself to take only tiny sips, just enough to moisten my mouth, resisting the primal urge to guzzle. Every instinct screamed for more, but my survival training screamed louder. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples that felt mocking in their beauty, the temperature dropped, not significantly, but enough for a chill to set in. The vastness intensified. The horizon stretched, an unbroken circle, a perfect, inescapable prison. No land, no ships, just the endless swell, the rhythmic groan of the damaged ship, and my own ragged breathing. The oceanic psychosis began to set in, subtle at first. I found myself staring at the shimmering surface, convinced I saw distant land, palm trees swaying. I'd blink, and it would vanish, replaced by the relentless blue. Then came the sounds, whispers on the wind that weren't wind, muffled conversations, just out of earshot. It was the vastness, the sensory deprivation, playing tricks on my mind. My brain, starved of external stimuli, started to create its own reality. I had read about it in survival texts, the mind's desperate attempt to fill the void. It was terrifying to experience firsthand, the feeling of losing your grip, even slightly. Recognize the signs of mental deterioration, I mumbled into the recorder. trying to hold on to my analytical mind. Hallucinations, paranoia, extreme mood swings. Combat them by maintaining routines, talking aloud, singing, recounting memories. Engage your brain. Stay tethered to reality. I started reciting the schematics of the Triton's deep-sea recovery system, step by agonizing step. I described the exact coordinates of the trench, the specifics of the vault's supposed construction, anything to keep the whispers at bay. Then there was the debris field. Over the next few hours, as night swallowed the last light, my archib slowly drifted into it. Twisted metal, buoys, pieces of superstructure, and bodies. I saw one, barely visible in the dimming light, a bloated, grotesque shape drifting silently past. It was Johnson, our lead ROV operator. My stomach lurched, not from seasickness, but from profound horror and grief. I forced myself to look away, but the image was seared into my mind. This was the graveyard of the Triton. My crew. The thought of scavenging immediately came to mind. There had to be something salvageable, something useful, but the dread was palpable. Approaching a debris field, especially from a catastrophic event, is extremely hazardous, I warned myself, the words barely audible. Sharp edges, unstable wreckage, dangerous currents, and what might be in the water. The residents. I knew the deep Pacific held its share of predators, and a fresh kill site was an open invitation. My primary concern was communication. The REB had a basic comms unit, but it was dead, freed by the shockwave. But maybe, just maybe, something on a piece of debris might be intact. My marine engineering instincts took over. I needed components, wires, capacitors, batteries, anything. The night was a vast, inky black, broken only by the dim, flickering glow of my hand-cranked flashlight. The air was heavy, humid, but the water still felt chilling against my soaked clothes. I saw movement in the water, dark shapes, larger than fish. I wasn't going to risk it in the dark, not with my injured shoulder. When the sun finally clawed its way back above the horizon, painting the scattered debris in a harsh, unforgiving light, I went to work. The patches on the REB were holding, a minor miracle. The water inside had gone down. I forced more water through the desalinator, sipping painfully slow. Then, the scavenging. It was a harrowing, nauseating task. I nudged my REB closer to the largest pieces of debris, using a spare paddle as a pole, trying to hook anything that looked promising. I passed by more bodies, unrecognizable faces, some tangled in wires. I muttered apologies to them, a desperate plea for forgiveness that I had survived. The scent of spilled diesel and decaying materials hung heavy in the air. I found a few things. A partially deflated emergency life raft, shredded beyond repair, but its fabric might be useful. A floating medical kit, miraculously sealed and intact, and a large, waterproof equipment case, bobbing low in the water. The medical kit was a godsend. Better pain medication, antiseptics, bandages. I immediately cleaned and redressed my shoulder, the antiseptic stinging but welcome. I took a pain pill, the blessed relief slowly spreading through my throbbing arm. The equipment case. It was heavy, difficult to pull aboard with one good arm. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and desperate hope. What if it was salvage gear? Or, worse. I managed to drag it onto the archib, my muscles screaming. With a pry bar I'd found earlier, I managed to crack it open. Inside, nestled among specialized tools, was a damaged, high-frequency satellite phone. Its screen was cracked, its antenna bent, but the indicator light, a tiny, almost invisible green flicker, was on. A miracle. And next to it, a small, waterproof emergency distress beacon. Its activation switch was jammed, its casing dented. My engineer's mind buzzed with frantic energy. This was it. Chance. The sat phone. If I could fix it. If I could get a signal. The distress beacon. If I could get it to broadcast. Assess the damage methodically. I lectured myself, trying to calm my racing heart. Don't rush. One step at a time. Batteries first, then connection points, then signal integrity. This is salvage on a microscopic scale. I pulled out my multi-tool, fingers trembling. The damage to the sat phone was severe. The screen was shattered, making it impossible to see a display. The antenna was bent, probably shorting the internal circuits. I tried to straighten the antenna gently, but it snapped with a brittle crack. Despair, sharp and sudden, almost overwhelmed me. Then, a thought. A wild, desperate gamble. The Triton carried an emergency L-band satellite uplink module for our deep-sea ROVs. It was designed to withstand extreme pressure, to be robust. Could I, by some impossible feat of improvised engineering, connect the sat phone's internal components to a salvaged piece of that robust module? It would be like performing open-heart surgery with a butter knife in a rocking boat with one hand. But it was the only way to get a powerful enough signal. I spent the next several hours lost in a furious, painful haze of concentration. The sun beat down small Arabe into an oven. My thirst was a constant torment. My head throbbed. But my mind, driven by a desperate, almost manic focus, worked. I stripped wires from salvaged electronics. I used tiny salvaged screws and even pieces of broken plastic as makeshift tools. My knowledge of circuitry, of satellite communication protocols, was my only compass. The sheer terror of being utterly alone, combined with the desperate hope of connection, fueled my frantic efforts. The distress beacon was simpler. The activation switch was physically jammed. I used the multi-tool's tiny flathead screwdriver to pry it. It was stiff, resistant. My good arm ached. With a final desperate grunt, it clicked. A tiny, almost imperceptible red light began to blink. It was broadcasting. A faint, desperate signal into the vast emptiness. But was anyone listening? Was it powerful enough to cut through the static of a world that didn't know I existed? I turned my attention back to the sat phone, now a Frankenstein's monster of wires and salvaged parts, crudely lashed to a section of the ROV module. I pressed the power button, a silent prayer on my lips. Nothing. Just dead silence. My heart plummeted. All that effort, all that pain, for nothing. But then an almost imperceptible hum, a faint, low thrum, far deeper than the Ard's groans. It was coming from below me, not the residual sound of the ROV's electronics. Something else, something large, something moving. My blood ran cold, unrelated to the ocean's temperature. It's still here, whatever it is. God, gasping breath, audio log, entry 003. Marcus Kane, the hum, it's real. It's close, and it's not from my Arjib. I don't know what it is, but it's huge. The sun, it's been up and down again. Another day gone. The thirst is a fire. But the fear is colder than any ocean. The terrifying sound that cut off my last log entry had been no hallucination. It was a deep, resonant hum, a thrumming vibration that resonated through the REB's hull, a low frequency that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly in my chest. It was too regular, too mechanical, too present to be a whale or any natural marine phenomenon. And then the shadow. A massive, indistinct form that had briefly blotted out the diffuse light filtering through the water. My RHIB had dipped violently in its wake, nearly capsizing. I had spent the agonizing hours since, huddled, trembling, my good arm gripping the edge of the REB, my eyes strained, peering into the inky blackness beneath the surface. The hum would fade, then return, sometimes closer, sometimes seemingly further away, like a massive unseen leviathan circling its prey. My rational mind, the engineer's mind, struggled to identify it. A submarine? Unlikely in this remote, uncharted area. And what kind of submarine would be making such a distinct, almost rhythmic hum without surfacing? A large, silent surface vessel. But the shadow had come from below. The dread was a living thing, squirming in my gut. It wasn't just the ocean trying to kill me. It felt like something in the ocean was... The sun had risen again, a blinding, oppressive glare that promised another day of relentless heat. My throat felt raw, my lips cracked and bleeding. The small trickle from the desalinator was barely enough to keep me from complete collapse. Every muscle ached, and my dislocated shoulder throbbed with a dull, constant agony that no amount of pain medication could completely silence. The patches on the RAB were still holding, but the persistent groan of the stressed fabric, the slow, imperceptible stretch of the rubber, was a new unsettling sound, a constant reminder of my precarious perch. The fear, however, pushed the physical pain to the background. What was that hum, and why was it still here? My eyes, burning from the salt and the glare, scanned the horizon, then plunged into the deceptively clear water beneath the Archib. The water was a dazzling, oppressive blue during the day, becoming a terrifying, opaque black at night. Then I saw it, not the source of the hum, but something else, floating up from the depths, a small, dark object. My heart hammered. More debris from the Triton, or something from the vault? As it bobbed closer, the midday sun glinting off its wet surface, I saw it was cylindrical, about the size of a 5-gallon bucket, made of some strange, non-reflective dark material. It had small fins, almost like a torpedo, and a single glowing red light pulsating rhythmically. My mind, despite the exhaustion and fear, went instantly to work. This wasn't standard Triton equipment. Nothing we deployed pulsed red like that. It looked military, highly specialized. Could this be a piece of the vault itself, or something the vault had contained? I had to know. The drive for answers, for understanding, overrode caution. Investigate unknown objects with extreme caution in open water, I narrated, my voice dry and strained. Identify potential hazards, explosive risk, toxic leakage, unknown biological agents. Approach slowly, from upwind if possible. Use a pole or other tool, not bare hands. My engineer's training, drilled into me over decades, was the only thing holding my crumbling sanity together. I used my salvaged paddle, hooking the mysterious cylinder, slowly drawing it towards the R-shib. It felt heavy, denser than it looked. As it came alongside, the pulsating red light was stark against the dark casing. There were no obvious markings, no serial numbers, no familiar logos. Just smooth, seamless, dark material. It was utterly alien. I cautiously pulled it onto the R-shib, setting it down gently near my feet. The hum from below seemed to intensify then, a chilling response to my action. A sense of eerie dread settled over me. This wasn't treasure. This was a warning, or worse. The device felt cold to the touch despite the ambient heat. The pulsing red light seemed to gaze at me, an unblinking eye. Was it scanning, recording, or was it simply a dying indicator? My gaze drifted to the wreckage of the Triton in the distance, or rather, where she had been. A few more pieces of debris were now visible, smaller, scattered further. The thought of that vault and what it contained became an obsession. My company, funded by an anonymous conglomerate, had been vague, ancient, highly pressurized, unstable. But never this. Never a deep-sea detonation that could erase a vessel the size of the Triton. My personal conflict surfaced then. My drive for adventure, for the impossible salvage, had always pushed me to take risks, to ignore the whispers of caution. My focus on the mechanics of the job often blinded me to the moral implications, to the why behind these shadowy missions. My wife Sarah had always hated that part of me, the part that chased the impossible and came home with a vacant stare. This vault, it was her greatest fear realized. The small medical kit I had salvaged was proving invaluable. I used more antiseptic on the saltwater sores that were beginning to bloom on my skin, especially where my clothes rubbed. The pain pills offered fleeting respite from my shoulder's agony, allowing me brief periods of focus. But the thirst was constant, a dry, rasping fire in my throat. My body was beginning to ache in new ways, the muscles constantly tense from heat and fear. My urine was dark, a grim indicator of severe dehydration. The silence, when the hum occasionally receded, was even more terrifying. The vast, empty horizon stretched, unbroken. My mind, starved of external stimuli, began to conjure figures in the shimmering heat haze above the water. I saw members of my crew, their faces distorted by the glare, beckoning to me. I heard their voices on the wind, calling my name. "These are hallucinations, Marcus," I forced myself to say, the words barely a whisper. "Sensory deprivation. Brain trying to fill the void. Don't engage. Focus on the real, the RHEB, the desalinator, the cylinder." It was a constant battle, a silent war waging within my own skull. I kept pumping the desalinator, my right arm cramping with the effort. Each precious cup of water was sipped slowly, every drop savored. I had to stretch my emergency rations. They were bland, tasteless energy bars, but they were calories, fuel for my shivering, exhausted body. I ate only tiny portions, forcing myself to chew each bite endlessly to prolong the sensation, to convince my brain I was sated. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the hum returned, stronger now, more insistent. It felt like it was directly below the RGB. The water around me shimmered with a faint, greenish glow, not bioluminescence, but something artificial, eerie. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked up the mysterious cylinder, its red light pulsing steadily, as if in communication with whatever was below. Then the water began to churn. Slowly at first, a disturbance from deep down. Not waves, but a deep, churning, boiling motion that seemed to emanate from the abyss. The hum intensified, filling my ears, vibrating through my teeth. My kib bucked violently, like a wild horse. I grasped the side, my good arm screaming with strain, trying to keep from being thrown overboard. Suddenly, a massive column of water erupted directly from where the Triton had gone down, hundreds of yards away. It wasn't her. It was a dark, roiling plume, thick with what looked like black silt, bubbling violently, smelling of sulfur and something metallic. My scientific training immediately identified it, a hydrothermal vent, a massive one, torn open by the deep-sea shockwave. But this was no ordinary vent. It was too vast, too turbulent, too dark. The smell was overwhelming, acrid and metallic, burning my nostrils. This wasn't just an implosion. This was a seismic rupture on an unprecedented scale, likely caused by the vault's destabilization. It had torn open the seabed, creating a new, monstrous geological feature. And the material spewing from it, it was dark, viscous, almost oil-like, swirling on the surface, mixing with the water. The thought of what kind of minerals, what kind of elements could be in that depth, triggered by whatever was in the vault, filled me with a cold terror. The air grew heavy, difficult to breathe. The black, viscous liquid was spreading, forming an ever-widening slick around my rib. I was trapped, and the hum, it was right under me now. It vibrated through the floor of the rattling my bones. I stared down into the glowing green water, trying to pierce the gloom. Then a shape, vast, impossible. It wasn't a shadow, it was defined. A colossal structure rising slowly from the depths, illuminated by its own eerie internal green light. It was enormous, metallic, covered in strange barnacle-like growths that pulsed in green light. And it was moving, articulated. It wasn't the vault, it was something else, something mechanical, something unbelievably massive. My mind reeled. What could that be? Another deep-sea vessel? An unknown submersible? It was unlike anything I had ever seen or read about. Its sheer scale was monstrous, and the hum emanated from it, a silent, powerful resonance that made the water around it ripple. I was staring at a leviathan, not of flesh and blood, but of steel and unknown purpose. It was slow, inexorable, rising from the black abyss, its eerie green glow illuminating the underside of my small R-bib, making it feel impossibly fragile. The horrifying truth began to dawn on me. The vault wasn't merely a cargo that imploded. It was a trigger. And I was directly above whatever had been unleashed. The terror of the unknown was far worse than the fear of death by exposure. It's still here. Below me, this thing. Audio log entry 004. Marcus Kane. I don't know how long it's been since the last log. Time is meaningless out here. The sun has risen and set again, I think. My shoulder is a burning agony, my throat is raw, but that hum, that sound is my only companion now. And the terror it brings. It's not just a machine, it's a leviathan. The terrifying sight that had emerged from the depths, illuminated by its own eerie internal green glow, was burned into my retinas. It was colossal, a metallic structure unlike anything I'd ever seen, even in the most speculative engineering schematics. It wasn't organic, but it felt alive, its movements slow, deliberate, inexorable. It was covered in strange barnacle-like growths that pulsed with the same unsettling green light, as if part of its very being. My RHAB had been caught in the currents of its ascent, buffeted like a toy, the sheer mass of the object creating a powerful displacement. I'd watched, mesmerized and horrified, as it broke the surface. It wasn't a ship, it was a platform, immense, 100 yards across, maybe made of a dark, non-reflective metal. It seemed to absorb the light around it, yet emanated that eerie green glow from seams and fissures. Its surface was segmented, angular, resembling some kind of colossal submerged modular construction. And then I saw them. Massive, articulated limbs. Not propellers, not thrusters, but jointed, multi-segmented appendages like the legs of some monstrous robotic spider, slowly retracting or adjusting beneath the surface. This was a self-propelled deep-sea mobile platform. But for what purpose? And how could something so vast have been underwater, undetected for so long? The sheer scale of it was mind-boggling, far beyond any known human engineering. The hydrothermal plume from the seismic rupture was still boiling violently in the distance. A dark, viscous stain on the ocean, smelling of sulfur and hot metal. The air itself felt heavier, almost humid, thick with strange aerosols. My scientific training, my understanding of deep-sea geology told me this was impossible. A natural vent of that size, spewing that volume of material, should have been mapped decades ago. But the vault's explosion, its implosion, had clearly done more than just sink the Triton. It had torn open the very crust of the earth. My gaze snapped back to the colossal platform. It sat low in the water, almost like island, its green glow flickering in the dawn. There were no obvious hatches, no discernible bridge, no signs of human activity, just the pervasive low thrumming that radiated from its core. Was it automated? Was it waiting? Or was it listening? The paranoia, fueled by exhaustion and the impossible sight, began to take root. I knew I needed water. The sun was rising, promising another brutal day. My desalinator was yielding barely enough to keep me from hallucinating. In severe heat and dehydration, conserve every ounce of energy, I rasped into the recorder, my voice a dry whisper. Move only when necessary. Rest. Let your body heal where it can. Any exertion burns precious calories and depletes water reserves faster. My shoulder throbbed relentlessly, a constant reminder of my fragility. I forced more sips of brackish water from the desalinator. The platform began to move, inexorably, not fast, but with a silent, profound power that rippled the water around my RH. It was turning, slowly, and it was heading in the direction of the volcanic plume towards the black, roiling water. Curiosity warred with abject terror. What was it? And why was it drawn to the very source of our destruction? My engineer's mind, despite the delirium, began to work. If this thing was moving, it had power. Vast power. And if it had power, it might have communications. It was a terrifying thought, but also a desperate glimmer of hope. It was colossal, a solid piece of infrastructure in the middle of nowhere. Maybe, just maybe, I could get close enough. But what if it was hostile? What if whatever it contained, or whatever it was doing, was too dangerous? The decision was agonizing. Stay on my slowly failing Archib to eventually die of thirst or be swallowed by the ocean, or risk approaching the unknown, a silent, glowing monolith that defied extinction. The choice was simple, yet terrifying. Adventure, always the adventure, had led me here. My wife, Sarah, had warned me about this edge, the one I always danced on. "One day, Marcus," she'd said, "your curiosity will kill you." Was this that day, or was it my only way out? The personal conflict raged. The engineer driven by logic, the human driven by primal fear, and the husband haunted by regret. I decided to try and approach it. Slowly, cautiously. My Arjeeb had no engine, so I had to use the paddle, my good arm screaming with pain as I tried to steer. It was agonizing, every stroke sending jolts through my dislocated shoulder. I used the currents, such as they were, to my advantage, trying to drift closer to the moving platform without directly crossing its path. It was like a minnow trying to shadow a whale. As I drew closer, the hum intensified, vibrating through the water. I saw details. The surface was strangely textured, almost organic in places, despite being metal. There were subtle indentations, faint symbols perhaps, that I couldn't decipher from a distance. The green glow seemed to emanate from within, from unseen conduits or power sources. It was alien technology, clearly. Nothing I had ever seen. Then the water around the platform began to shimmer with an unnatural intensity. Not just the green glow, but other colors. Blues, purples, even flashes of orange. And I saw things in the water around it. Not fish, but strange, indistinct shapes, constantly shifting. They seemed to be drawn to the platform, or perhaps they were part of it. My scientific mind tried to categorize them, but they defied definition. They were too large to be plankton, too amorphous to be jellyfish. They pulsed with their own, faint bioluminescence. The water itself seemed alive, teeming with this otherworldly activity around the Titan. "The ocean can be alive with bioluminescence," I narrated, my voice strained. "From tiny plankton to deep-sea creatures. But this is different. It's too concentrated, too vibrant. It suggests an energy source, or a very unique ecosystem. Proceed with extreme caution." My heart hammered. Was this a natural phenomenon being drawn to the platform, or was the platform creating this? I drifted closer, caught in the subtle currents pulled by the platform's slow movement. The smell intensified now, a mix of ozone, sulfur, and something sharp, almost electrical. It was coming from the platform itself, not just the volcanic plume in the distance. This thing was emitting something into the water. My skin began to tingle, a faint, unsettling, prickling sensation, like static electricity. I knew enough about deep-sea vents to know that they harbored unique, often extremophile life forms, but this wasn't a vent. It was a machine. The sun began its slow descent again, turning the sky to fiery hues. The platform's green glow became more dominant in the fading light, casting an eerie, shifting luminescence across the water. The surrounding water, teeming with the shimmering, pulsing, multicolored forms, made it seem like I was sailing on a liquid galaxy, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Then I saw it, a dark, gaping maw on the side of the platform just above the waterline. It looked like an access hatch, or perhaps a docking bay. It was partially open, a darker void against the green glow, and from within it came the hum. Louder now, more distinct, and a faint, almost imperceptible ticking, like a clock. My mind, exhausted and frayed, immediately thought of the vault. Was it inside? The decision had to be made. Risk the unknowns of the platform or continue drifting to almost certain death. I chose the former. The lure of the unknown, the engineer's drive for answers, the desperate hope for salvation. I paddled, pushing my body to its absolute limits. My shoulder screamed with every stroke. My vision swam, but I focused on that opening, that dark promise. As I finally managed to pull my RAB alongside the behemoth, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. The metal surface felt cold, even through the tropical heat, and strangely smooth, almost featureless. The green glow illuminated my face, giving everything an alien cast. The ticking from the opening was now clear, a rhythmic metallic pulse, and the strange glowing, amorphous shapes in the water around the platform seemed to gather, observing me, their own bioluminescence reflecting in my wide, terrified eyes. They felt like guardians. My RIB scraped against the metal hull with a soft, sickening crunch. I reached out with my good hand, grasping a rough, barnacle-encrusted section. It was sharp, tearing at my glove, but I held on. The sheer fatigue was overwhelming. The platform's surface stretched upwards, slick and impossible to climb without assistance. My one good arm was screaming, my dislocated shoulder a constant, burning agony. I needed a way up, and the ticking, it was getting louder. A countdown. I'm on it. I'm actually on it. Audio log entry 005. Marcus Kane. I don't know how many days I've lost count. My arm, my shoulder, it's agony. But I made it. I'm on the monolith. And it's not what I expected. The hum is everywhere. And the ticking, it's getting louder. I think I made a mistake. The last thing I remembered was clinging to the side of the RAG, my good arm screaming, my body utterly spent. The colossal platform, that glowing dark titan, had loomed over me, its sheer slick surface impossible to scale. The metallic clanking, the whirring sound that had been the access hatch. A section of the massive structure, just above where I was, had slowly articulated, folding inward like a grotesque origami, revealing a dark, cavernous opening. A ramp, made of the same dark, seamless material, had extended, lowering itself slowly towards my small boat. It was an invitation, or a trap. My engineering brain, even through the haze of pain and dehydration, screamed caution. What powered it? What was inside? But the alternative was slow death on the RIB. I had to take the chance. With a last desperate surge of adrenaline, I had pulled my battered RIB into the opening, scraped it onto the ramp, and then, with a grunt of pain that tore through my vocal cords, hauled myself onto the solid, unyielding surface of the platform. The ramp had then silently, inexorably, retracted. The hatch had sealed with a soft, final hiss, plunging me into a profound, suffocating darkness. Now, hours later, I lay huddled on the cold, featureless floor just inside the entrance, my dislocated shoulder throbbing with a dull, incessant agony. My hands and feet, exposed to the humid, chilling air within the vast structure, felt numb, a familiar ache creeping in. The temperature inside was cooler than the surface, perhaps in the high 60s or low 70s Fahrenheit, but with a strange, artificial humidity that felt clammy. The hum was omnipresent here, vibrating through the very floor, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate through my bones. And the ticking. It was faint at first, but now it was distinct, a rhythmic click, 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 like a colossal clock counting down. My hand-cranked flashlight was almost useless in this immense space. Its beam barely penetrated the gloom. The air felt sterile, yet carried a faint metallic odor, mixed with the strange sulphurous tang that still clung to me from the volcanic plume outside. My immediate surroundings were featureless. Smooth, dark walls, a high, unseen ceiling lost in shadows. There were no lights, no obvious control panels, no signs of life, human or otherwise. It was a vast, empty shell, a silent testament to unknown creators. The total silence, save for the hum and the ticking, was unnerving. My mind, already frayed by sensory deprivation on the open ocean, now struggled with the complete lack of visual cues. It was an echoing void. In enclosed, unfamiliar spaces, maintain spatial awareness. I rasped into the recorder, my voice thin and dry. Rely on other senses, sound, feel. Map your environment, even in darkness. Avoid panic, which leads to disorientation. I forced myself to reach out, to feel the wall. It was smooth, cold, strangely seamless, like a single massive piece of forged material. My first priority was water. My small desalinator was running dry, and my thirst was a screaming agony. I fumbled for my emergency rations, forced down another mouthful of the tasteless energy bar, knowing every calorie was critical. I needed a source of fresh water, or I wouldn't last another day. I began to explore, crawling slowly due to my dislocated shoulder and overwhelming fatigue. My flashlight beam cut through the absolute blackness, revealing only more of the same featureless walls. The sheer scale of the interior was daunting. I felt like an ant in a giant's castle. The air pressure felt subtly different too, a slight fullness in my ears. Was this thing pressurized? A deep-sea habitat? But for whom? And why so empty? As I dragged myself deeper into the structure, the ticking sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just a simple clock. It sounded mechanical, intricate, and it seemed to be coming from ahead, deeper inside the monolith. Curiosity, a powerful and dangerous force, pulled me forward, overcoming my fear. I found a corridor, or what felt like one. It was slightly narrower, still dark, but I could make out where floor met wall, where wall met ceiling. As I moved, the faint green glow that emanated from the outside seemed to seep in through unseen cracks, casting a subtle, eerie luminescence around the edges of the corridor. It was enough to create shifting shadows, playing tricks on my tired eyes. And then the smell intensified. Sulfur, and something else, a faint, almost sweet but disturbing aroma, like decay. The air was getting heavier, cloying. My lungs burned with each breath. Strange air quality in an enclosed space is a red flag, I reminded myself, forcing the words out. Prioritize ventilation if possible. If not, limit exposure. Toxic gases can incapacitate quickly. But I had no way to ventilate this place. I was trapped within its lungs. I pushed forward, driven by the ticking. It was a compulsion, a need to understand. My shoulder was a screaming inferno, but I ignored it. My vision swam. The hallucinations intensified in the near-total darkness. I saw shadowy figures flitting at the periphery of my vision, heard whispers, disjointed words carried on the strange, humid air. My lost crew, Sarah, their faces, their voices, mocked and beckoned from the gloom. Don't give in, Marcus. Stay awake. Stay real. The battle against my own mind was becoming as fierce as the battle against the ocean. Then I came to a large, circular chamber. The green light here was stronger, pulsing with a more deliberate rhythm. The ticking was deafening, a relentless thump-click, thump-click. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by the eerie glow, was it? The vault? It was enormous, far larger than what we had been briefed on. Not a simple container. It was a complex, cylindrical structure, perhaps 30 feet high and 15 feet across, made of the same dark, seamless material as the platform. It was embedded into the floor of the chamber, extending upwards towards an unseen ceiling. Its surface was covered in a lattice of glowing green lines, like circuitry, pulsing in time with the hum and the ticking. And it was breaching. Fluid, thick and dark, was slowly seeping from cracks in its casing, pooling on the floor, catching the green light. It was the same viscous, oily substance I had seen on the ocean's surface after the Triton went down. And the smell, here it was overpowering, a mix of sulfur, ozone, and that sweet decaying scent. my throat constricted. This wasn't just metal or a vault. It was a living, leaking entity. My engineer's mind, despite the horror, raced. The vault wasn't imploding because of external pressure. The shock wave had been caused by its own failure. It was a contained reaction, a powerful, unstable energy source, and now it was leaking. This platform, this colossal structure I was on, it wasn't a salvage vessel. It was a containment unit, designed to hold this thing at depth, and it had brought it to the surface. Why? I crawled closer, a morbid fascination overriding my fear. The ticking was coming from a prominent console built into the side of the vault itself, its glowing green lines mirroring the vault's own patterns. There was a small, recessed screen, unlit, and a single large red button, slightly depressed, pulsing with the ticking. It looked like an override, or a self-destruct. My attention was drawn to the glowing green lines on the vault's surface. They seemed to pulse with a subtle beat, a rhythm that was strangely familiar. Then it clicked. My years of working with seismic data, with deep ocean sound signatures, it wasn't random. It was a heartbeat, a slow, powerful pulse, like an immense living organism. This vault, it contained something alive, or something that mimicked life. The realization sent a wave of profound terror through me, colder than the ocean. My company hadn't been salvaging an artifact. They had been trying to retrieve a deep-sea biological entity, or perhaps a synthetic life form of immense power, now unleashed and deteriorating. The implication was staggering. This was a nightmare far beyond any shipwreck. This was an extinction-level event potentially unfolding right beneath my feet, and I was trapped inside its containment vessel. My mind reeled. The leaks were increasing. The air was getting thicker, harder to breathe. The strange, sweet smell was now overwhelming, sickly. My skin continued to prickle. I stumbled back, gasping, my head swimming. The hallucinations intensified, voices screaming my name from the shadows. Sarah's face, pale and accusing. My friends from the Triton, their ghostly forms pointing at the vault. "You brought this up, Marcus." Environmental hazard, unknown biologicals or rapidly expanding chemical agents. I forced myself to vocalize, each word a painful grunt. Limit exposure, seek sealed environments. Analyze composition if possible, but prioritize escape. This is not normal. But there was no sealed environment. I was inside the containment. My eyes fell on the red button on the console, the ticking, the pulsing. It was a countdown. Was it self-destruction? Or was it a release? An acceleration? If it was a self-destruct, could it save the world from whatever horrors were inside? Could I, a lone, injured engineer, sacrifice myself to stop this? The ultimate moral dilemma. My life for the unknown horrors of the vault. The floor beneath me vibrated, the entire platform. It wasn't just the hum, it was a shift, a deeper groan. Was the platform itself failing, or was it beginning a new phase? The circular chamber I was in seemed to be rotating ever so subtly. The green glowing lines on the vault intensified, pulsing brighter, faster. The ticking became a frantic rhythm. My mind screamed for answers, for logic, but all I had was primal fear, and the chilling realization that I might be the last witness to humanity's biggest mistake. It's accelerating, the ticking, the heartbeat. Audio log entry 006, Marcus Kane, this is it, the end, or a new beginning. I have to try. The air, it's burning, I'm choosing a side. The last thing I remembered was the vault's agonizingly fast ticking, its green lines pulsating with a frantic internal energy. The air in the chamber had become thick, cloying, burning my lungs with its sulphurous, sickly sweet scent. My vision swam, the shadowy figures of my hallucinations twisting into grotesque, accusing forms. My mind, caught between delirium and a sudden terrifying clarity, had processed the horrifying truth. This wasn't just a vault. It was a containment unit for a living, volatile entity, and it was reaching its critical point. The red button on the console, a silent, ominous sentinel, had called to me. It was a choice. My life, or potentially the world. I had stumbled forward, every movement a torturous battle against my failing body. My dislocated shoulder screamed, my legs felt like lead. The air was a tangible wall of agony. My engineer's mind, perhaps for the last time, had overridden the human's terror. This platform had brought the vault to the surface for a reason. Was it to release it? Or was it an automated response to a critical breach, bringing it to a depth where its detonation would be less globally catastrophic? I didn't know. But that red button, it felt like a failsafe, a final desperate lever. When faced with an impossible choice, choose the path that preserves the most life, even if it's not your own. I gasped into the recorder, the words rasping from my raw throat. Assess the greatest threat. Act decisively. Hesitation kills. This was my final decision, a redemption for the risks I'd taken, the family I'd neglected, the path I'd always chosen. This was my one chance to make my life and my death mean something. The air quality was plummeting. The thick, viscous fluid leaking from the vault was now pooling, almost knee-deep in the chamber, shimmering with that unnatural green glow. It bubbled faintly, releasing more of the caustic gas. My skin crawled, a burning sensation spreading across every exposed inch. I could feel my body shutting down, my limbs growing heavy, my thoughts scattering like dust motes. My vision was tunneling, a dim, blurry circle of green and black. With my last ounce of coherent strength, I pushed towards the console. The ticking was deafening now, a frantic mechanical heartbeat vibrating through the metal floor. I reached out with my good arm, my fingers stiff and unresponsive, fumbling for the red button. It was large, smooth, and pulsed with its own internal light. My fingers brushed it, then pressed down. Nothing. Not immediately. For a terrifying second, I thought I had failed. Then a profound, resonant thrum vibrated through the entire platform, deeper, more powerful than anything before. The green lines on the vault intensified, pulsing like angry veins. The ticking stopped. Absolute silence, profound and unnerving, swallowed the chamber. Then a new sound. A deep, mechanical groan, unlike anything I'd heard from the platform before. It wasn't a sound of breaking, it was a sound of immense power. The floor beneath me began to tilt. The entire platform was shifting, it was sinking, slowly, inexorably, with a controlled, deliberate descent. The hum returned, lower, more powerful, a deep vibration in the water. The platform was taking the vault back down. If a containment breach is irreversible, deep water termination is the safest protocol, I muttered, a grim final analysis escaping my lips. The immense pressure acts as a secondary containment. The crushing forces render volatile materials inert, a deep-sea grave. This was its design. This immense automated monolith wasn't meant to bring the vault up, but to bury it. My desperate action had merely triggered its final protocol. It was taking its deadly cargo back to the abyss. The water, thick with the black, glowing fluid, began to rise around me in the chamber. It was cold now, not the oppressive heat of the surface. I knew the platform was flooding its internal compartments, accelerating its descent. I was going down with it. A wave of profound calm washed over me, a strange peace that only utter exhaustion and the acceptance of fate can bring. My journey was ending. I looked down at the recording device, still clutched in my good hand. This was my legacy, my final words, my truth. The light was fading in the chamber as the liquid rose higher, swallowing the green glow, extinguishing it inch by agonizing inch. The pressure in my ears intensified, a deep, persistent ache. My lungs burned. My mind, though fading, was still haunted by Sarah, by the life I'd left behind, consumed by the abyss of my career. The vault, this mission, it had taken everything. But in these final moments I had chosen. I had chosen to try and protect what remained of the world above. The water reached my chest, then my neck. It was icy cold, shocking my already failing system. The last thing I heard was the vast guttural groan of the immense platform descending into the crushing depths, a sound amplified by the water filling my ears. The hum, the endless, resonant hum, and then the black. Not total darkness, but the kind of darkness that only the deepest ocean can offer, a profound, absolute void. Thanks for tuning in. If this narrative pulled you into its depths, consider giving the video a like. Your support is how these stories get told. And if you're ready for more chilling, plausible adventures, make sure you subscribe and join our growing community of explorers. What will we uncover next?